I'm Amanda Khan from Stockholm University, and this is a brief overview of my provocation paper for CUI 2022, titled Voice Assistants Have a Plurilingualism Problem. A recent trend among commercially available voice assistants like Google Assistant, Apple's Siri, and Amazon's Alexa is the introduction of multilingual functionality. Both Google Assistant and Alexa now allow users to select more than one interface language and interact with their voice assistant in either language without needing to repeatedly change their language settings. This functionality was introduced with labels like multilingual support and multilingual mode, and with the express purpose of improving usability for multilingual users and households. However, there is a variety of usability issues specific to multilingual voice assistant users that this functionality doesn't address, as is clear from the wealth of complaints by multilingual users that can be found online. Evidently, there's a mismatch between developer intention and user expectation of what kinds of tasks a multilingual voice assistant should be able to handle. I believe that this mismatch can be attributed to a lack of plurilingual competence among voice assistants that claim to be multilingual. In natural human-human interaction between multilinguals, different languages and registers are often mixed and switched between to make communication smoother. For instance, a speaker might choose to say the name of a place in the phonology of its local language to avoid confusion, or to use an idiomatic or technical word or phrase in a specific language for greater clarity. This practice of alternating between languages within single interactions or single sentences is commonly called code switching, and it's one of many skills in the diverse linguistic toolbox of a plurilingual. This typical trait of multilingual interaction is not reflected in the design of multilingual voice assistants, however. For example, Google Assistant's multilingual functionality relies on a sort of parallel monolingual approach that aims to quickly detect which language is being used in a query and then sticks to that language no matter what. The prospect of multiple languages being used across a single query, or indeed a single response from the voice assistant, is not taken into account at all in the system architecture. In order to evaluate the consequences of these design choices, I conducted a simple pilot study using Google Assistant and Apple's Siri. First, I prompted each voice assistant with 3 simple queries, mainly in English but containing single intersentential code switches into a secondary language, Swedish. They were also prompted with 3 corresponding queries designed to elicit responses that contained code switches into Swedish. The queries targeted basic and common voice assistant tasks, like asking for directions or interfacing with a shopping list. As expected, both voice assistants failed consistently across all tasks. None of the code-switched entities were perceived or interpreted correctly, and the incorrect interpretations were often highly unlikely in standard voice assistant usage, like offering directions to a restaurant halfway across the world. Code switches in voice assistant responses, meanwhile, were always read out using the wrong language for speech synthesis, which resulted in output that was at times completely incomprehensible. This total lack of plurilingual competence has a critical impact on usability for large swaths of the current and potential voice assistant user base. Most multilingual users, especially those living or traveling abroad, will likely have already encountered issues similar to those in the pilot study. For these users, multilingual functionality isn't an extra convenience, it's a complete necessity for even the most basic voice assistant functions. While it's good that multilingual usage is being considered at all, the path to a truly multilingual voice assistant requires a systematically different approach that focuses on plurilingual competence and the realities of actual human-human multilingual communication. This is, of course, harder than it sounds, but introducing simple heuristics to make sure a voice assistant is actually speaking the correct language throughout an entire response would be a good start.